Let's hope we don't have to use it. Yes, you're right. Stay in it long enough, you will.
Yes, you will. Good evening, everyone. I'd like to call to order the September 13th, 2021 regular scheduled meeting of the Lamar County School Board. Before we get started, I've asked Mr. Matt Mayo if he would lead us in a word of prayer.
I'll pray with us. Heavenly Father, we just thank you for the opportunity to come together tonight to do the business of Lamar County School District. I just pray that you give us the wisdom and the insight and the demeanor, Lord, to take care of the business of the county. Just pray for each of the families of the students, the staff, and the board that's represented here, and pray for your hand on our communities, all of you, God. We love you. We thank you for all these things in Jesus' name. Amen.
Amen. Would you please stand for the pledge? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. Item number 2 is our meeting procedures. This basically means if you have not already been approved to speak before the board today, you will not be allowed to speak. We do have agendas that are on the back, alcove or whatever. If you didn't get an agenda, you can pick one up there. All right, item number 3 is the approval of the general agenda. And before I ask for a motion, we do have one removal. And it's item number 6, presentation by Ms. Beth Eller. She will not be present. So with that, I'll open the floor up for a motion.
So moved.
I have a second. Second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 4 is Mr. Ross Bell with BXX Insurance on our workers' compensation insurance. Mr. Bell.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm glad to be here, and I assume you have all seen that. And the top part of it is historical perspective, and fortunately, it has come down, gradually over the years. But this year to last year, it's off by about 24,500 bucks. And so the next pages show you the marketing aspects, where we went, what they quoted. And my recommendation is to stay with the people that we have it now with Summit. They are the lowest, and we've had it with them for at least 4 years.
Okay.
Any questions?
Any questions, Mr. Bell? Okay.
Do you need a motion for
I need a motion to accept that.
I move to accept the insurance proposal with Summit for our workers' compensation insurance.
All right, do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Bell.
Thank you all.
All right, item number 5 is a presentation by Ms. Kate Stringer. She's running a little late, so I'm going to move on to item number 7, which is a presentation by Mr. Ray Payton. Mr. Payton, I'll remind you of the discussion we had on the phone. You have 3 minutes.
Yes.
I'll give you a little wave at 30 seconds to let you know you got 30 seconds to go.
Okay.
We appreciate you coming.
Thanks this way.
This way.
This way.
You can go ahead and get started when you're ready.
Okay, my name is Ray Payton, and my purpose this evening, I want to discuss options to the vaccine. Because, from the government, we get lots of mandated vaccines. If you've been paying attention, everybody knows that's what's going on. So I just want to give some options that I believe are being overlooked. The first one is, number 1, they're ignoring the natural immunity. That every person that's had the COVID-19, they're just ignoring the natural immunity that your body develops when you had that vaccine. I mean, not the vaccine, but when you had the virus. So, God created our bodies to really heal itself. So it fights off disease on its own. Okay, secondly, they're ignoring the large number of treatment protocols that are available for COVID-19, like hydroxychloroquine, ivermectin, anticolonials, antibodies, and many others. there have been over 25 different treatments that can be used to fight COVID-19. Number three, instead of using the different protocols that are available, what's happening, they're just ignoring all of these others. And it's just like somebody get diagnosed with COVID-19. Well, what happens, they like send them home for 2 weeks and say, okay, come back to us. Well, during that time period, what happens? People get worse. And then when they finally get back, and when they finally get back, well, then their health has gotten so bad, it's almost impossible to recover, even though many have recovered. So we wanted to bring out those. Now, the last one I want to bring out is, I'll just go ahead and say it, is the Bible teaches Christ Jesus has redeemed us from the curse of the law. Redeemed means he's rescued us. And for the believer, when it comes to the word of God, that is one valid treatment, I call it, that we can use as believers to claim what belongs to us as a Christian. That's one of our rights. And so I wanted to share those with you guys. And going back to the different treatments, there was a prison over in Arkansas. Yes, okay. In Arkansas, where there were over 500 inmates that were treated for COVID using ivermectin. Out of over 500, only one had to go to the hospital. And there were no deaths. And so I just encourage everybody, let's use these other treatments that are available. We'll live a longer time. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baker.
Thank you.
Okay. Item number 8 is a presentation on Ms. Lease. And I'll do the same for you, Ms. Compton, just in 30 seconds. I'll give you one minute to let you know that, please.
Can I take my mask down to help, or can y'all hear me?
Right there. Yes.
Like that?
That's right.
Okay. Thank you for letting me come before you and speak. My name is Lee Compton. My daughters Bella and Sarah are middle and elementary school students in the Summerall school system. I wish to discuss the Lamar County School District COVID protocols and their impact on my family. My eldest daughter has twice been identified as a close classroom contact of another student that later tested positive for the virus. From the beginning of the school year, Bella had only 11 out of the 32 days of in-person instruction and interaction with her middle school classmates. Prior to this year, Bella was an excellent student with an AB average. Because of the difficulty that she's experienced with distance learning and the isolation that she felt, Bella's grades plummeted. After a great deal of struggle and a return to some in-class instruction on the hybrid schedule, Bella has finally been able to raise her score somewhat and her spirits. It has become necessary for an adult to remain present with her during her distance learning. As a single mother who works full-time, Bella's 6th grade school year has become an all-consuming matter for me. I've spoken with other parents about the status of their own children and have learned of situations that are as bad as mine, if not maybe a little worse. And I would like to know if there is any evidence that the measures that we're taking are having any effect. Does it work? So I had some questions. How many of the students have been prevented from attending class by the policy in person in class? How many students who were barred from class are now having difficulty with their grades? How many of these quarantine students were later diagnosed with COVID? And was there a follow-up by the school to track their health status? Was there data compiled to show that contact tracing and the hybrid schedule is working? And are there any special groups that are exempt from the quarantine policy and hybrid schedule? And if so, what is the rationale for that? Is there an exemption for vaccinated students in the light of the high breakthrough infection rate and their ability? Yes, ma'am. their ability to also pass the infection. These are the questions that I wanted to submit to you. I brought a copy of what I
Yeah, if
wrote.
you could pass that out, people know. Is it written down here? I don't know if we can answer all those questions right now. I don't know if we have the date right here available. I mean, it's something I think we could probably get together and email back to you. That's okay?
Yes, ma'am.
I mean, I will tell you, all the decisions we make, they're data driven. This guy right here, he looks at the data. And a lot of the people on our board, you'll actually if you'll stay for the meeting, there's actually an item here where we're going to talk about the data, how to possibly set some triggers as to when we go to hybrid, when we come off the hybrid, that type of thing. So, we'll definitely look at take these questions, get them answered for you, email those back to you personally. If you'd like to stay, we're going to have some conversations about data. So,
Thank you.
thank you. Thank you, ma'am.
Your school for summer, elementary, and middle?
Yes, sir.
I have a middle schooler and an elementary student, not at summer level. I mean, this is difficult for everybody.
Thank God.
Okay, Ms. Stranger is in the parking lot. Can you go check? Thank you. All right, we're going to move on to item number 9, approval of the August 9th, 2021 minutes. Do I have a motion? Have a motion and a second. All in favor? Any opposed? And one abstention. Okay. Item number 10 is the approval of August 12th, 2021 special call minutes. Have a motion. Have a second. All in favor? Same thing. Any opposed? And one abstention. All right, item number 11 is the approval of the September 1st, 2021 special call minutes. Have a motion.
So moved.
Second. Motion, I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. We'll go to item number 12. Approval of the monthly financial report for June 2021. Do I have a motion?
Seven.
We have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 13 is the approval of the fiscal year 21 year-end short-term loans. Do I have a motion?
So moved. Second.
I have a motion and I have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 14 is the approval of the fiscal year 2021 actual budget. Have a motion. Have a second. All in favor? Aye. Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 15 is to rescind the award of bid to Zepton for air quality detectors due to not meeting the specification. Have a motion. Have a second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes. Item number 16 is the approval to award bid for air quality detectors to ACP Creative IT, for $213,500. Being the sole bid, meeting the specification. So have a motion.
So moved.
Now, second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 17 is to rescind the acceptance of bid from HDI for Oak Grove Middle School's gym floor due to errors in original bid specifications. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 18 are board attorney matters. Mr. Norton.
I didn't know if you wanted, yes.
Oh, is she here? Oh, Miss Candace here? Okay, yeah, are you ready? We'll go ahead. You come stand right here, there's an X right on the floor there, right in front of Miss Lynn.
Right here?
Yes, ma'am. You can just face us. And, I did, like we spoke on the phone, you have 3 minutes. I'll give you a little wave at 30 seconds, just let you know you got 30 seconds left.
All right.
Whenever you're ready.
My name is Candace Broomstringer, a former employee of Lamar County Schools. I come today as a concerned parent to request that you remove these masks from our kids. This is child abuse, unhealthy, and unconstitutional, and y'all are mentally and socially damaging these children. COVID is a fear tool used by the powerful, wealthy elites of our world to get us to comply to their evil agenda. When you know that, it changes everything. You need to take off your mask and blindfold and open your eyes to what's going on in our country and follow the money trail. They don't care about our health and safety. It's about money, control, and power. Are you truly concerned about the health and safety of these kids, or are you complying out of fear for your jobs, your name, or the school funding? You work for us, and we should put our kids' needs first. If you can't put these kids' needs first, then some of us parents need to take this place. I don't raise my kids with the government, and these are our children, our God-given rights to their health that y'all are violating. Do masks even work? Do you see how nasty these kids' masks are? They aren't even wearing them properly. It's simply checking a box to comply. Do you know the second most unclean place on your body is your mouth? You can guess where the first place is. Do you know what it does to a child to breathe in that nasty mask all day? Take those masks to a lab and see how many infectious bacteria they find. It's worse on their lungs to breathe your own air all day than to breathe the air around you. We must mingle with each other to boost our immunity. Excessive quarantine and sanitizing weakens our immune system. Are PCR tests even accurate? If so, what happened to the flu? Why is everything now a COVID diagnosis? Why are the proper treatments for COVID being banned? Why are the COVID death numbers so high? Why other causes for death are so much lower? Do vaccines even work? Is it really a vaccine? Why are the vaccinated getting sick and spreading variants? Yet more people are encouraged to get the vax while the number continues to rise. We have been conditioned to believe the government and the CDC. They get to say who had or died of COVID, who died or reacted to the vaccine. Do you know if a vax person goes to the hospital with COVID, they aren't allowed to record that as a vax person? The numbers are all manipulated. Why are the COVID numbers so high if the vaccines, social distancing, or masks work? Because it's lies. I say ditch the mask, let the kids play together, stop the vaccines that cause sickness or death, demand COVID patients get proper treatment, and watch the numbers go down. Why? Because it's God's natural way. Why did millions die of the Spanish flu 100 years ago? It was the vaccine, not the flu, that killed them. Many masks didn't help either. Who was responsible for that pandemic? The same family bloodline that's behind this one. Why do we repeat history, and why do we leave God out while we put our faith in a lying Fauci, Dr. Dobbs, and the CDC who profits from this pandemic? The love of money is the root of all evil, and people, this is nothing but evil. What the kids are going through is not science, not healthy, and not fair. God never intended for us to cover our faces and inject our kids with poisons. Truth can be revealed, and these masks will come off. Fauci and CDC will be exposed, and people are going to jail for crimes against humanity. If you think complying will end the agenda, you are sadly mistaken. You are helping them accomplish their plan to communism, and the government is not our friend. It's to populate and control. And I got about 30 seconds left.
Thank you, Matt. Thank you, Mr. Andrew. Okay. Where were we?
Board Attorney matters.
Board Attorney matters. Interlocal agreement with Lamar County Sheriff's Department.
Yes. Each year, we have to sign an interlocal agreement with the sheriff's office. And this year is slightly different in that we have put in here that the maximum that we would reimburse the sheriff for providing some of his officers to help us with traffic would be $56,700, same amount as last year. But we're not using quite as many officers, so Tamika will keep track of it. And this interlocal agreement says we'll pay them on an hourly basis, reimburse them, but a maximum for the year of $56,700.
Any questions or?
Move to approve our local agreement with Lamar County Sheriff's Department.
All right, have a motion, do I have a second?
Second.
Two, all in favor? Any opposed? And that passes. Under 19th or 16th section, land manager matters.
I'm standing in for Kevin.
You're standing in for the top.
So we're opening 3 sealed bids for hunting lease. First one is from Wiley Anderson. He's the current leaseholder. $10.27 per acre. It's 119 acres. Second one is from Greg Touchstone. His is for $20.50 per acre. And the third bid I'm confused because it says it is also from Greg Touchstone.
Changes bid.
No, $20.50.
You just forgot emailed it.
There's a slight difference in the math. Both of them are for 119 acres.
Same parcel? You think it's a different parcel?
He may have thought there was a different parcel because on his envelope, he showed a different township, but that is not our township in Lamar County. So, he may have thought it was different, but either way, he is.
2050.
Yeah, $20.50 per acre.
But since William Anderson is the current leaseholder, don't we have to allow him?
Yes, he has a right to match
Match it.
that. So Kevin will get in touch with Mr.
So we
Wiley.
don't need to vote on that.
Correct. And we'll get back with us as to whether Mr. Anderson matches it. If he doesn't, then it would go to Greg Touchstone.
Right, so we'll move on to item number,
That's our most expensive
yeah.
lease for sure.
I whispered to Jeremy, there must be some good deal on that. one.
It is, it's high fenced. Yeah.
That's a mic right there.
That's,
That's
They're captured.
That explains it.
Yeah. All right. The next item we have would be to cancel lease number 64 for Mr. Jordan Bryant. And you see that the next item is that we're canceling the lease so that he can get a 40-year residential lease.
Okay, open the floor for a motion.
So moves to approve item B and item C cancellation and the approval of the new lease for mortgage purposes.
Second for B and C.
You second, June, I'm sorry. All right, all in favor? Any opposed? And that passes.
And the next item C is to approve a 40-year residential lease to Jordan Bryant.
Have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second?
second.
All in favor? Any opposed? And that passes.
The next is to approve assignment of a lease number 613 from Clark Levi to RDW Ventures LLC.
Have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor? Any opposed? And that passes.
The last one is to approve tree planting in section 16, 2 north, 16 west, from the Mississippi State Park Commission. $92.50 per acre for 125 acre tract.
So moved.
Have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes.
Thank you, Dr. Hampton. You have fair law.
Yeah, I'm asking. Late. But thank you. Item number 20 is our superintendent's report.
All right, I am very pleased to inform that we've had all of our grade levels, all of our full division today. For the first time, had a wonderful day, it was exciting. Still have the virtual option for some of our students. We'll look at that moving forward. Did want to remind the board and the public that Friday, October the 8th will be a makeup day for Hurricane Ida. Students are on campus on Friday, October the 8th. And this will be the first day of our second 9 weeks. We'll talk about our intercession that we have planned coming up in the last week of September for our students. Little did we know when we went into this new school year that we would be hit so hard with COVID and have to do so many more things with so many virtual students. But the intercession time is going to be a wonderful time for our students to be able to get caught up in time, not have to wait until the end of the 9 weeks or the end of the semester or the end of the year to get caught up. Be in process, in time learning, so that we can get them back on steady ground so that we can start the next 9 weeks on solid ground with some of our struggling students. We did have to set a deadline for the intersections for parents to be able to sign their students up for. There's a lot of logistics that go along with planning this. The number of teachers we need to be, and not just the number of teachers, but the right teachers to be able to address the learning of the students in different age groups, the students in different certification levels for our teachers. So we did have to set a deadline for parents to be able to sign up for their students for the intercession. And so that was September the 6th. And up to this point, right now, we have 1,014 students who have signed up for our intercession time. We're very pleased. We'll have 112 teachers working the intercession time, which is right. And the whole purpose of this is trying to get some very one-on-one intention to students. And so our teachers will average about 9 students per teacher going forward. And so I think that's a very manageable number for our teachers to be able to really focus on getting some of the learning loss.
Is that all remediation, or is there some STEM in there?
We still have some activities planned for them. It's not going to be as much as we had hoped because we still, with as much as we've seen out, we want to make sure we address those learning loss so that we can get them on top of starting for the second 9 weeks. So there will be some opportunities for them to do that. We just won't have, we envision more of an enrichment of a camp type atmosphere for those students for enrichment. We're not going to expect them to sit for 4 hours, 8 to 12, and do nothing but remediation. So there's going to be some time for them. They're going to have, part of that logistics. First of all, I want to thank Teresa Jenny, Dr. Gray, Alice Rainwater in our office for putting this all together, getting those out to parents, those emails, this, that, and the other. Mitchell Smith, our transportation department, did a fantastic job and is still working on trying to get our kids to and from school. Julianne King with our child nutrition department has done a fantastic job of getting ready to feed the kids breakfast and lunch. And so, those things we're hoping that will pay off. I know will pay off for our students to be able to come in and get caught up and get them feet up underneath them and get ready to go forward for the second 1 weeks and not wait. The thing is, the students who are behind, I'll speak to your students, this will be a perfect opportunity for them to come in and get caught up and get those things, get the confidence back and not have to wait and keep being behind the whole time. So it is going to be focused to make sure that we address some of the learning loss. So any questions about intersection and any other questions about that?
It's Monday through
Friday,
Friday. Okay.
8 to 12. Okay. And again, we'll provide transportation and we'll provide breakfast and lunch for students. All right, I'd like to kind of go over some of our COVID numbers. The reason we've made the decision, as I discussed with the COVID committee, I informed the board last week about coming back this week, is our numbers have dropped. We have seen a sharp decrease in our numbers. This past week, we reported to Mississippi Department of Health that we had 8 employees that tested positive. We had 32 students test positive this past week, and that's down from our high at 218. We've had 12 employees that we had to quarantine, which was down from the high of 86. We had to quarantine students, 224 students out of our high of 1,607, 1,617 students at the high. And the majority of those 224, because we were on the hybrid schedule at the time, was due to contact outside of school. It was not close contact. We had a couple of situations in a kindergarten class last week. We had them back full due to close contact in a couple of our high school activities that had some cases there where we had to close contact. We had 0 outbreaks for the second week in a row, and so that is a very positive number there. So I will like to talk, because it's going to kind of lead into our next discussion about some of the changes that the Mississippi Department of Health and CDC has changes to the Mississippi Department of Health guidelines that we follow. We do not, and I want to reiterate this. This is a big one for us. Is that we are not required to quarantine individuals who are students inside of a classroom area that will both students are wearing masks. If they're 3 feet or less, they didn't have to quarantine. They're 3 feet apart. And so if you come in close contact, say if we were looking and I was positive, we were 3 feet apart, we were both wearing masks, you could still stay in school. Quarantine now, one of the biggest changes is that quarantine used to be 14 days. Now, the Mississippi Department of Health is giving us guidance that we can end that at 10 days. But even better than that, if the child has no symptoms for 10 days, they can come back after the 10-day quarantine. But if the child has no symptoms after 7 days, they also have the opportunity to test either through the school or through a clinic on day 5, 6, or 7. And if they test negative, then they can come back on day 7. So we're talking about a week that we can, we cut it down from 2 weeks, and Mississippi Department of Health allows us to cut it down from a week to a week. And I think that the option to be able to do it for a week, I think that's going to definitely help. Household members, if someone is positive in the household, all unvaccinated members within the household must quarantine, all unvaccinated for 10 days. And there's no early test out. If you are vaccinated and you have no symptoms, you can still come to school.
Doesn't that also apply to a 90-day, if you've had it in the last 90 days in that same group?
Yes, and we do track that. This group, we are tracking that 90-day that we do look at that. So to provide that same type of level of immunity. So outbreaks, another change in guidelines. Before September 3rd, it was 3 or more in any group or activity or anything. And so they've given us a little leeway on this because we've seen is that we've had groups that are, say, basketball team or football or show choir or band that has numbers of students. You have almost 200 members of the band, and in some of our schools with 100. But football players, that sort of thing, baseball, whatever. So most of our, typically it could be some of our middle school and other grades. So when we look at outbreaks now, it's 3 or more in a group of less than 30 or less. And then if there's a group of 30 or more, it's going to be 10%. So if there's 40 students in this group, then it'll be 4 students that would constitute an outbreak. And so that's going to help tremendously because we've had some times where, extra group activities has been very problematic for us at high school, middle school, and that I think this is going to be the biggest thing for us.
It's huge. It's huge. Yes.
Again, if the student is in an outbreak, so if I'm in a class, so I have to bring in and go home for 10 days, they still have any tests and on day 5, 6, or 7 come back that day 7. So that's specifically a close contact. Any questions about that? I do think that I'm very appreciative of this Department of Health for providing some of these guidelines so that we can look at try to keep as many students in school as possible, as safe as possible.
Any other questions for him? We're just kind of lead right into item 21, discussion on figures to change our running options. This was something that our last special call meeting, we called together a committee and myself, Matt Mayo, and Dr. Pimpton to come get together and come up with some options that we can present to the board. And I've asked Mr. Mayo to take the lead on that, so I'm going to put it over here.
Thank you. We're trying to look at our number and our data trends to get an idea of when the numbers have gotten high enough that an event like closing the school or preferably going to hybrid would be triggered, as well as looking at events that as probably progressed and schools are doing better and the cases are down, when those schools can return to learn in a full 5-day-a-week fashion. We've been real fortunate that our numbers have been incredibly good over each of the weeks. We've seen improvement to the point where last week we thought even the high school and middle schools would be able to come back. The Department of Health guidelines are in line with what we had already discussed about when a school was in traditional learning 5-day-a-week, positive rates for what we may need to call an outbreak or what we may need to trigger, looking at a option to go back to a hybrid schedule. One part of, the language is very clear on what constitutes an outbreak in the Department of Health guidelines. It very much is a different tone of potentially how we may want to treat the old rule of 3 outbreaks constitutes the may consider options of closing the school to 14 days of virtual learning. In my opinion, that was not a very effective tool for us because of people, schools that had to go to 14-day virtual, people continue to congregate, people continue to sort of live their best life, for lack of a better term, outside of school, that congregated to do virtual school, and it failed to have the desired effect, and we actually had numbers and during that week continue to go up because kids were congregating. In lieu of using a 3 outbreak type rule, I looked at and discussed and looked at our data, and I would be more of recommending a percent of population type deal. The Department of Health defines those outbreaks and gives us latitude of those outbreaks. If a group has that 10% number, that outbreak, and that whole group, we can send home as the Department of Health dictates. And that's, I think, very fair if you have an outbreak large enough that it affects that much of a whole group. When you start looking at other populations, sort of the precursor, I guess, of how many people we're going to see test positive really is how many people we have isolated in quarantine is proven to be a leading indicator, particularly those that are close contacts outside of school, which we can track. And so I think I would like to propose or discuss setting a number for when a school total population becomes isolated or quarantined. So that's not those that have tested positive. We have enough that have tested positive and enough that are close contact or same household across the whole school population that we would set a limit. And again, I would recommend that limit for elementary, that's a different limit than the high schools and the middle schools because of their traffic patterns and how they interact. But I am the entire population get 10% quarantine or isolated, which is what we had several times for the elementary school. And we would, for the elementary school, I'd recommend 15% because they do not interact with each other. So the likelihood of spread, you're more likely to contain that inside that classroom. So I think that threshold will be a little higher because they're not as social and not as overlapping. For a middle school and for a high school, I would recommend the threshold of 10%, that if the entire population became quarantined and isolated, that we would bring to the COVID committee recommendation to change our learning format, but I would also recommend that learning format be moved to a hybrid format and not a virtual format so that we still continue in-person learning. We are able to spread out students. And that's sort of, when I've looked at, I went through the data and where we were for numbers, and those numbers are consistent for some of the actions that we took and when we took it. The other part of that is if a school triggered hybrid, when do we come back? And my recommendation on that would be that if that same population that hit either 10 in a high school, middle school, or 15 in elementary school, once that population falls below 5% for 2 consecutive weeks, that we return to school. Because at that point, I feel like we contained our spread and slowed down what's going on.
What's the population? What's left in the school?
Once the total student population, because those kids are going to come back in at different times. And so it's kids that are not isolated or quarantined in the school's population.
I have a question.
Yes, ma'am.
So there's no such thing as a trigger to close the schools?
There is, no, they do not tell us we have to close the school. I mean, they give us some guidance on there are times that we may want to, but it does not require us to the same degree that it requires us to identify outbreaks and send outbreak groups home. So they changed the language in the way that is written in the guidelines from almost a guideline is you will do this in this case to you may consider these options among others.
I like the idea of looking at them differently.
With the 10% they did.
That's what I'm saying. I mean, they're already doing this. Do we even need this? That's my question. I mean, how much are we going to change from what they're already doing?
Well, with the elementary, if you change it to 15.
Well, that's huge and that's fine. But I mean, I'm thankful for the leeway that they've given us here.
Yeah.
That's huge. That's such a big deal from what we've been having to require versus.
Here's the downside to me, is you didn't, the whole outbreak language that existed of, so say you have 30-person classes or less, you still can have 5 kids. Shut down Oak Grove High School at 1,925 population, the way it is now, if you use outbreaks as the trigger.
Yes. You have a Spanish class,
I would
French
use
class,
the
and
10%.
culinary.
Once it gets past the individual classroom.
That's right. Yeah,
Then we move to 10%.
That's right. in lieu of a number of outbreaks, to go back to Howard, that we moved to a percentage of population to trigger. When we need to do that.
I think this is what we've been talking about for 2 months.
Well, what I really like about this is we're telling parents that if we adopt this new policy, that we are going to do everything in our power not to ever send them all back home again. So that's really comforting to a lot of parents who are especially struggling with, that needing to go to work thing. We're saying that we're now going to look at each school differently, that we're no longer going to say, okay, if you're middle and high, it's all shut down. So this policy says that we're treating each school differently, and then we're, of course, we're continuing to look at elementary different components.
One thing is that with Mississippi Department of Education, they're only giving us that hybrid option until the end of October. So that's kind of, we can.
So at the end of October, does it become in school or virtual?
Traditional or all virtual.
But again, I think we were forced.
And I've already spoke to my piece with the Mississippi Department of Education. Some face-to-face instruction is better than no face-to-face.
I wish this.
Although we had to go against, we earlier were faced with the decision of risk every student, go and do what we did, which of the policies we violated was the Department of Education, or go 100% virtual. I still think we made the best choice, so the
Yes.
safest and the most effective way.
Yes.
And if it comes down to it, I'm willing to make that stand again. And
Great.
Me too.
we end up
I just
having
want to
to
make sure we put all the cards.
deal with the Department of Education we have to deal with.
I think there's
I
no
agree.
question that any day they're in school is better than every day.
Well, they didn't approve hybrid when we went hybrid last time. That's what.
So, yeah, that's right.
What you're
It took them
saying.
2 weeks behind us before they approved it.
This is 2 years in a row that hybrid has worked the way that it worked. When you see those numbers, we had to do it last year with the middle and high schools. We never had to do it with the elementary schools. And it's tougher with elementary schools. I get it, but
The only other thing is that ask justifiable leeway, because it might be 15%. We're not close, especially like in some of the elementary schools, that we could still operate with those kids coming.
I think what those percentages do are designed to
Give us just a.
get a guideline that we need to have a
I
conversation.
just want to be hard.
I don't think it's a hard and fast number, but I think it needs to, at that point, we clearly need to make sure we clearly assess.
And I know y'all know this, but I'd like for everyone to know that, is that when we sit down and make a decision, it's not in isolation of this number or that number or this number or that. It's how many cases, where are they located? What hallway, what building, this, that, and what the exposure rate.
Well, I recall last year, we actually sent home, I think, the 4th grade out of a Grove upper, I believe, and
we felt like we were in the same
right,
area.
right.
And
So we
nobody
even got it down
The
to that.
exposure was.
I think these are, what I propose is absolutely a guideline for our COVID committee to
discuss it.
use, just that a guideline, but it also gives us some tangible things to measure towards and try to improve on. I will tell you, we issue data every week to the Mississippi Department of Health, and we aggregate, we don't do it by school. But when you look at the numbers, without identifying specific schools, I'll tell you that during the course of our outbreaks that we had, at one point near the beginning, the highest percentage of isolated and quarantined population, we had 35% of one entire campus isolated or quarantined. As of 9/7 report, that's going to cover the week before 9/7, that population was down to 1.7%. So clearly pretty staggering and that's the most extreme. But you do have a lot of them that are in the high teens and 20s to everybody was under 5% last week or this week. Every population is. And the same is true. That's looking at total isolated and quarantined. And if you also break it down into positives, you also have very good track records for what we look like on a positive as it moved down. The other thing I think is going to help us is that the fact that those kids in the last 90 days that have been infected also have that same immunity exemption makes it a little bit less likely to spread. And so you have, theoretically, the most vulnerable potentially have already had it. So I think that helps us. The other numbers that I did look at was how many students and things like that we have still what are at risk, what total population have we had that was positive for the virus. Our lowest school, when you count just students who tested positive, 4.3% of all students still tested positive. Our highest school, over 20% of all students have tested positive at that school. So one, that school had a pretty rough run, but two, they've got a little bit of a help to get back and catch up because the most vulnerable populations.
Just for clarification, I know we track staff and faculty numbers. Do those staff and faculty numbers play into the percentages that we use for outbreaks and things like that?
Yes, we use total population we chart for positives. It does for positives too, but we still count total population.
By the definition, we have to go by teacher positive and 2 students.
That's enough. Because of course that can be an issue too, if you've got a large amount of your teacher population that then tests positive. Then it's hard to be there.
In one school, we've got 45% of all teachers that are positive.
Yeah.
And so we could not have operated that school because we don't have we can't get substitutes. And so even if the student population had been lower, we would have had to do something at that school because we can't operate.
It's not just a teacher issue, it's
Yes.
also a bus
Bus drivers,
Cafeteria workers, administrators.
So just following up on her question, your 10% is including staff.
Yep.
In that number.
Yep.
Total
Total
population of the school.
Yep.
And the 15% for upper and lower elementaries, both elementaries?
Yeah, I mean, it does.
You wouldn't treat them any differently?
I wouldn't. I mean, they still have changed classes. They don't have the extracurricular activities. They don't have the social calendars. And quite honestly, I mean, what we have in the data and looked at is they track where you are exposed. And I mean, quite honestly, inside the schools have done a great job. I think one thing that is going to be imperative as we come back to school with everybody in person is enforcing masks and how we wear the mask, because that is one of the exemptions the Department of Health gives you from what gets to count as close contact or what gets to count as is if both people wear a mask. You know, again, I cannot control what people do outside of school, and I know that there's lots of masks not being worn. But what I do know, if one of those kids comes back to school and is infected, and both kids in school are wearing masks, it's less likely to affect the innocent parties and spread if we have both parties correctly wearing masks.
Is that a new change?
What's that?
That if they both wear masks and are in 3 feet, that's a new
changed it
change.
from 6 to 3.
That was in August.
That was
Yeah, I changed that in August.
That in the 10 days is that's the biggest thing to me.
10%.
10% in days.
For the groups that are.
What do we do to make this a policy?
Well, first, before we have opened up for the vote, I need to go to the other end of the table here and ask Mr. Norton, based on what Mr. Mayo has proposed to us and the MSDH guidelines, do you see us being so far off the mark that we would lose our immunity, which has been provided to us by, I don't know the bill. But I just want to, I know you can't put your hand on the Bible and say, yes, you will never be sued, but.
I'll tell you, I think I can defend you in any lawsuit that comes up. You're in good shape.
Okay, all right. Okay, so with that, I'll open the floor for a motion. Matt, if you want to put it in the form of a motion, it may be, if you want to do the whole thing or separate it, however you want.
So I mean, I have the high points and we can make wordsmith in minutes, but I move that we establish the standard to evaluate moving individual schools to a hybrid learning scenario at 10% isolated or quarantine for a high school or middle school, and 15% isolated or quarantine total population for an elementary school. That would be the guideline where we would consider moving back into a hybrid school format. And in the event that a school does move into a hybrid format, I would recommend that we set a guideline that the school has achieved less than a 5% quarantine rate for 2 consecutive weeks before returning back to traditional 5-day learning.
we can forecast that we can make, you see, going back and forth, we do have logistics things that we have, like food, we have to convert our cafeteria, so just, just,
We don't need to do it on Friday, just have it on Monday.
but we can forecast, like.
Right, that's what helps us.
I can forecast how many kids are coming back off before.
We can make a decision by Wednesday of the week prior, that gives 2 days for staff.
So you say isolate or quarantine, are you calling isolate positive?
Isolated positive, and quarantine is a close contact found by either
Total.
inside the 3 or in a household and unvaccinated and not exempt.
So we're not gonna get, okay, so we're not gonna get to that, 10% faster by including quarantine students in with that? Say we're in a high school, 10%, I'm playing the devil's advocate here. Say we're in a high school and we got our 10% and we've got 5 students who have 5 different classes throughout the day and they're coming in contact. I guess the 3-foot rule will protect us from getting to a bunch of people.
That's right. Part of the mask helps you what you have to define. So you've lowered the threshold, or I guess you've raised the threshold for what it takes to be a close contact
That's right.
because of the properly worn mask
At
rule.
3 feet, yeah, I can go with that.
But again, at an Oak Grove High School, that means you have 195 student or staff quarantined or isolated to reach that 10%. The high at Oak Grove High School during the last few periods was slightly over that, but for a limited time.
In the beginning, when we weren't wearing masks
Right.
and everyone is in the classroom.
What will that do someplace like Baxterville that's so tiny? Will that number be unreasonable?
In a Baxterville environment,
You're looking at about 260.
309 total population, so you got to go 46. Only the first week of it did we have an issue at that school where they would have triggered that, and then it's improved each week from there.
Ever since then, yeah. And that's what I wanted, I like the percentages much better because of that. We've
Yes.
all talked about that. Because it takes into consideration the size of the school.
And the other thing I think is real important is we don't paint with a big, I think every school is treated differently, because you've got some schools in this, like the Baxterville, they might should have been in school every day because they did a great job down there for how whatever they're doing, they did real well. Quite honestly, we have a number of schools that's true for.
Our smaller area.
Well, my biggest concern that we've not discussed is the school bus situation, because we can very easily shut down, I don't know how many kids can ride on a bus, but we get one situation on a bus and we've sent home an entire busload of kids. So is there some way we can look at the,
In 3 feet, so, that's the things where we must contact trace in 3 feet. So it might be the
It wouldn't be the
front.
whole bus, it would just be the ones 3 feet around that we're
Inside 3 feet.
inside 3 feet.
If they're at 3 feet.
because we have seen situations where if you rode bus 12 last week, you're quarantined. So did that mean we didn't have,
Did they have seating?
that's what I was gonna say, so does that mean that there were no seating charts, and is that
In some
something that we
cases, yes.
worked with transportation to try to
We
fix?
have.
Because the last thing we want, is a bus and Baxterville to show the entire school.
And so, several situations like that where, the bus driver's been out, so we've had to have a sub driver or someone else. And it's there's a myriad of extraneous variables that go involved in some of these situations that comes to perfect storm sometimes.
Well, so is that a motion then?
Yes.
That's a motion. Well, can you do a second for discussion, just in case anybody else has any questions?
Okay, so I'll make a second for discussion.
All right. So, any more questions from Matt, Dr. Hansel? Let me ask this question of you. Do you feel that what we're proposing here, you can implement?
Oh, I could implement, I
I don't want us to be thinking numbers and not know how it's gonna actually affect
I
the
think,
day-to-day operations of the school.
no, I think this is very doable with the math, and so, it's a fail-safe measure, but I do think I don't want to get into and again, the discretion to be able to come to you guys and say, we're at 15%, but because it's this area is not exposure to the whole school, this limit.
No, I think that's certainly.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? So that, again, that would be a measure of trying to keep them in school.
Well, a measure to bring in a conversation,
Yes.
for sure.
Any more questions?
No.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And that passes.
Nice job, Matt.
Thank you, Matt. Appreciate everything you've done. I know it's a lot of hard work. sir. Appreciate it. Item number 22 is to set the next regular scheduled meeting for October the 11th at Oak Grove High School, PHC, beginning at 6 p.m. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
I'll be there, home call Monday night, Tuesday.
I'm fine with both of them, if that's what y'all want to do. That is Columbus Day.
It's
If that matters.
See,
Well, I can tell you that week, if we, from my standpoint, it would have to go to a Monday before or a Monday after. I am
But what
On
about
call.
Monday after? That's a Columbus Day holiday.
Monday, the 18th works for me. I can definitely do that.
what would that do to our schedule? Is there anything we would need to vote on? Is there anything that we would need to vote on financial wise? If we delayed it a week?
Financial wise, it may be some hiring issues that,
I know there's a reason why we always have it, and that's why I usually try not to say, but
this is not a large hiring month for October. If it was, June, July, that would be different, but
If there's anything that needed to be pushed through, we could definitely have a special call meeting to put them through, just do a call in. The 18th, okay with everybody? We'll move it to the 18th.
That's good for me.
That works.
I did, since we're having it at the high school. I did check with the price.
I'll check with the price. If we need to change locations or.
Yeah, we need to change location.
I make a motion that we have it on October 18th.
I'll second.
Right there, for basketball.
All in favor?
Uh,
Any opposed? And that passes. Item number 23 is the consent agenda. Mr. Braswell, any questions?
No questions.
Ms. Hensley?
On that,
That's right, I'm sorry. Ms. Hensley's having to step out. Mr. Mayo,
no questions.
Mr. Chance,
I mean, I'm good.
all right. I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as
I
presented.
make a motion that we could approve the consent agenda as presented.
Have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And just please let the minutes know, Mrs. Davis, that Ms. Hensley stepped out. Aye. All right. Takes us to item number 24, other, having other. Item number 25 is to consider executive session. We have one personnel matter. Have a motion.
I make a motion that we consider executive session for the reason of one personnel.
Have a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That passes.
I make a motion that we enter executive session.
Do I have a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? That